Good morning, everybody, and welcome to what I'm going to colloquially call the quarter today because it is only me. It is only your friend Eric rather than our friend and co-host who is currently AWOL today, Aaron Montgomery. He is actually not going to be here today. So pretty much you guys are stuck with me. The good thing about it is I will be open to any questions you want to pull up on. We have anything in the world as our oyster. We can do whatever we want to do because there is nobody else here to tell me no. The problem is, you guys are probably thinking, like, hey, is this a preview of the take up? No, it is not a preview of the take up. It is still the half. It is just me, however. So, any questions you have, anything you guys want to talk about, anything you want to discuss, by all means bring it up. If it's embroidery, if it's decorated apparel, if it's anything, because as you guys know, on the half we get to talk about whatever we want to talk about. And I think part of what I'm going to talk about today is certainly the excellent episode we had of the two regular guys this morning. We had Christine Shreve on, we had Lindsay Salcido from Applicate Getaway, and that was really cool. We talked a lot about the kind of continuum of cottage industry or home business into kind of the commercial industry, and we discussed kind of where that is and what that means to both individuals who are in these businesses, who are in the decoration industry, and to kind of trade shows and meetings and what that is too. So I'm going to say, in essence, I have been harping on this for a great long time, the idea of this kind of continuum going on. So for me, this is a natural question. This is a natural thing to discuss anyway, but I really do think that that is a continuum. It is a spectrum. People who make the sharp divide, if you haven't been in any of my hobby to pro classes, I don't actually believe in the sharp divide. And I love the kind of metaphor that came up today on the Two Regular Guys show. If you haven't seen it, go to tworegularguys.com and check that out as it becomes available in podcast form. But the kind of idea that came up today was this question of where does everybody fit? What does it mean to have these home businesses, these commercial businesses, brick and mortars, or people running out of their third bedrooms? And how it got described today by Lindsay and also by Christine was essentially as the way you would think of people ordering food. And I think this is how we think about it for any business situation. I think this makes sense. We're talking about segmentation here. There are many kinds of restaurants, from fast food to full sit down businesses to food trucks, but they all have a different service they're providing. And I think we have something similar going on with the continuum between kind of home embroiderers and what we would consider full commercial embroiderers, though I'm the first person who's going to tell you if you're selling something professionally then you're commercial. We can talk about your practices, but let's make it instead people who are working from their own homes and home adjacent businesses to maybe brick and mortar shops or the traditional production shops. That's really the continuum I think people are talking about here. And I would say that each one of these groups has space, and also of all sizes, because you can actually have brick and mortar, very small embroidery shops, and brick and mortar huge shops, as well as small home shops and actually large home shops where we've essentially built up a large shop on our own home property. So yeah, in any case, I want to talk about where these all fit, and also anything else you want to talk about. I mean, last week I think we got into some food discussions. I'm happy to talk about coffee at any time. I know I've derailed the channel with coffee several times already, and I have coffee in my award-winning Reggie's cup here. So obviously, I'll be always good about talking about everything else. But if we can, I do want to get into that continuum. But first, let's go ahead and talk to a few of the people who have shown up and commented. By the way, if you are watching and haven't commented, please jump in, tell us where you're listening from, talk to us, ask questions, let me know what's going on in your embroidery world or your decoration world or your business world or anything. Let's just chat. Justin Armenta, digitizer himself, of JA Digitizing, and of the Embroidery Nerd, says half of the half. Yes, like I said, this is the quarter. This is just Eric. So you poor people who also like to watch me on the take up are getting double extra Eric today. Rona says afternoon. Happy to see you here. Jeff Fuller, also of Embroidery Nerd and Fuller Embroidery Works. And yes, the quarter, absolutely. This is definitely the quarter, and it feels like the quarter. Also, it's going to be hard because I am going to try desperately to cut myself off. If I hit the 30-minute mark, I will absolutely hit the dump button on myself. How I'm going to manage that, we'll find out. But if I see that thing hit 30 minutes while I'm talking, believe me, I can at least separate my consciousness enough to dump myself out of the show. Ramona says, picked up a third machine this week. Awesome. I have 2 machines in production and 1 doing test work. Fantastic. And see, if you don't know Ramona, she digitizes and is working from home. So here's a home-based business with 3 machines, three running machines, 2 in production, 1 in testing for digitizing. And what I'm going to tell you is Ramona's shop is bigger, in that case, bigger production-wise, equipment-wise, than some of the traditional gift embroidery shops I've known, or people who are doing uniform customization. And hey, think about the classic old school lids shop in the mall, the hat shop that's doing embroidery on a single head. They are still a commercial embroidery provider of a sort. Well, she's got more machines than they do. So if you want to make that argument, then that's always an argument we can make. Mike says it's the quarter. Absolutely, Mike, it is the quarter. I am half of the group that we usually have here. Though Aaron will be out again next week, and I'm going to effort a guest. I'm hoping to have another guest host, and they may or may not get cut off at the end of the 30 minutes, but we'll see what happens. If I can get another guest host in next week, I will definitely do so. DJ Anderson, also digitizer and educator himself, says hello. Lori's coming in from New Hampshire. Hi, Lori. Happy to have you here. Marta's coming in from Texas. Happy to have you in as well. And Mike says, Fat Jens will be 50 minutes. No, it won't. Believe me, 30 is it. And talking about that whole metaphor with restaurants, the metaphor ended up being that, or the analogy was that small home providers are like food trucks, where they do something that is maybe idiosyncratic, that's individual to themselves and high quality, but costs a little bit more, might be a little slower. Ramona says, I'm the food truck, but no chicken tacos. You could make chicken tacos if you want. There's always the possibility for chicken tacos. You just can't serve them to customers. Mike says this, Alberta, Canada can't get time away from running 30 to 50 piece hat orders on my single head to complete upgrading a TMEHC to use modern cat frame. So that is an old school Tajima multi-head, folks, if you don't know. Yeah, I understand how that is. I have been in that capacity before, where we're trying to make do with the machines we have. In fact, for us, it was frequently the other way around. We had older big multi-heads sitting around, and we would have to bring them back into service on jobs they could handle. If you've ever worked on a machine that doesn't run very well, or that is not modern, and what I'll say is, boy, sometimes they work really well on large, flat hooped, table hooped, single color jobs. And we had a very, very old Barrett in our shop that I am not joking. The keyboard on this thing made it look like some sort of 1960s Missile Command. It was very old. It had to have 2 adapters to get any sort of input. We were essentially using tape reader input off of a floppy drive. And 2 specialty pieces of equipment to get there. But we ran really large pieces on that single color all the time, and it ran like a champ. But yeah, old machines, converting old machines, getting them ready for that stuff. They still run well when they can, but boy, parts and getting them running is always an issue. Thing is, a lot of people, this is how they work on this stuff. They work on single heads and just increase their duty time. The difference is, you may find that at certain piece limits, you don't want to run your single head that much. You don't want to have to be keeping up a shift like that. But yeah, sometimes you get stuck with it, man. I feel that big time. Jerry's in from St. Louis. Hi, happy to have you in. And here's Jeff coming in with a comment. I run from home. I need another machine, lol. Yep. I provide a service to larger shops in town. Do not. That's a big deal. Unique service, the unique selling proposition, right? The unique value proposition. And I'll actually go back to something I heard at a ThreadX conference. And now I can't remember the speaker who said it, and I feel bad that I can't, but off the top of my head, I don't know. But this speaker said, and I'm going to use spicy language here, what is your HSF? What's your holy shit factor? What's the thing that actually sets you apart? And I think what often sets people apart, they think it's going to be branding. They think it's going to be some sort of quality issue with their embroidery or their decoration. But often it's just providing a service other people aren't willing to, though it can be artistic. It can be creative. It can be that kind of execution. When entering the business, I had to look for a way not to directly compete, find your niche, and ride the wave. Absolutely. And what I'm going to say is, as an in-house digitizer, part of what I provided to companies I worked for is we were big time problem solvers as far as redesigning work to work very well with embroidery and coming up with execution that would happen on their schedule or under their budget, things like that. So low stitch count options for large areas. I did that for the Albuquerque Balloon Fiesta, and we did some pretty good stuff for them. Certainly we did if you've seen me talk about the film and TV stuff I've done over the years, A lot of that is about how can we do things quickly and accurately, and also work with the company to provide kind of consultation as part of what we are. So my rundown on this always stems to this phrase: you want to be a consultant, not a commodity. If you are a solutions provider, you're more than the person who owns the machines. If you're just the person who owns and runs the machines and anybody can do exactly what you do and you don't have any further knowledge to offer, or you don't come with solutions when someone comes to some sort of difficult problem to you, that's a difficult thing. That's a hard thing to deal with. Usually you're going to end up being a commodity. You don't want to be the polo shirt box, the hat box that money goes in and shirts come out. Now, sometimes people want that from you. And if they want that from you and they're paying you for that, that's no problem. If you're having trouble finding your niche, sometimes it's because you've gone into this just saying, hey, I provide embroidery. And like, yes, you and everyone with a machine. And the other thing I'm going to say is this is the awful thing. Sometimes people say, I have good customer service and my quality is solid. And I'm like, yep, that is the entry cost. That is the cost of entry. That is what the barrier we have to have just to be in the business, is to be able to produce embroidery that looks okay and runs okay, and that we have to be decently available in customer service and not horrible people. That is the entry level thing. That's some stuff you were supposed to do. And this is, I believe, I'm trying to remember. I think it was Chris Rock who did a stand up comedy version of this thing where he's like, hey, you don't get medals for feeding your kids. That's some stuff you were supposed to do. And for embroiderers, I go, you know what? You probably don't get medals for not making horrible looking shirts. That's some stuff you were supposed to do. That is just the barrier of entry. The thing is, I think all of the people here, everyone who's here, everyone who's listening, you have something that you either do uniquely, that you offer, you have a perspective, you have your experience, and also, aside from having the equipment, being able to do that, you have something to offer, and you may not be offering it yet, but you can. And it can also be niche products. I know patches. I've been talking patches a lot because I've been kind of living in patch world, both product wise and in my own work, doing the patch class, which by the way is available now as a recording. So I'll talk about that later on Take Up for sure. But yeah, living in patch world, patches is one of the ones that I did. We came up with small run patches that we did for wardrobe and costuming for TV and movies. And the ability to do incredibly small run patches, digitize it in-house and turn it around quickly became a thing that actually got us a bunch of other more conventional work. So I think that was interesting. But I think that's the thing. A home shop right now could be incredibly well positioned to do very small, unique work that costs a lot, but is hands-on with a customer, where they're going to take a customer on and say, okay, I'm going to help you with the creative. I'm going to make this thing work for you. I will help you get a solution, provide these initial things. If you end up ordering 1,000 of them, I'm going to outsource it. But the creative work, what I like to think of as the embroidery rapid prototyping of patches, of garments, that's something you can do. Or things like I've known people who did religious work where it's large, detailed work like vestments that takes a lot of work, may take some sewing or construction, something that is not common to most commercial embroidery shops, and they did all this work. Or I knew someone who did Celtic or Irish dance dresses, and I don't know all the terminology for this, but these like step dance dresses were incredibly expensive. She also did the construction work, but she did the embroidery, and so was able to provide this entire custom kind of world, this entire top-down solution. I think that's really cool. So that's one of those things. And here Mike says, we're talking about the kind of dealing with the way you have to put things together and run them on machines. He says, I'm lucky that this still makes mathematical sense investment wise, just a time problem. Yeah, that's always the issue, especially if you're a solopreneur. If you are a small home base and maybe you're on your own or you've got one other person working with you, that is often the rub for smaller shops, is trying to figure out, when do I hire in more people? When do I get more equipment? Do I outsource things? Do I keep them all in-house? And how does that make sense? The thing is, and I love that he says mathematical sense investment-wise, absolutely. Part of this is doing the math. Part of this is understanding how much time you're spending on something, how much you're investing into it, and understanding that for pricing. Pricing is always the issue. Whenever I teach pricing, I have to stop and tell people, let's talk about your value. And one of the big things I say is, you can't just peg your pricing directly. Well, you can, but you probably shouldn't just peg your pricing directly to the amount of time spent, the amount of materials put in, and some sort of keystone pricing on blank garments that you bring in. The truth of the matter is, you are providing a value that may be outside of that, especially if you are being a consultant instead of a commodity. So being the kind of person who says, okay, you want to do what, you have what kind of budget, let me figure something out for you. That's the kind of tame version of it. Let's say you're doing the super creative, crazy version of it. I want to embroider this thing that doesn't exist, and I need you to source it, get it created, help me figure it out. Or like I did for the film and TV people, we need these 8 military patches from these different units. They all have to be designed so they work for embroidery from our original concepts and done in 8 hours. And that's a different thing entirely. And honestly, but it is something that I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to charge the same, even though you might say, okay, you could do a commercial job with your rush fees and just use your same book to get there. I'm going to charge more for that job, even than something that was more conventional that would be done on a real rush scale, because I'm doing something that's beyond the pale. It is not something another shop would do, and it's something that maybe we are only in our area, we were the only ones capable of doing at that scale, at that speed. In that, we have a value we're providing that is more than the sum of its parts. And also because people like to deal with us because it was trouble free. That's another thing. The way you deal with people, it doesn't have to even be your product that makes you have extra value. So I want to bring in a comment from DJ here. I've been on both sides of the industry and love both. I've learned a ton from the home side. They aren't scared to try new techniques and do things most commercial embroiderers wouldn't even attempt. I wish I started in the home side before getting into the commercial side. Absolutely. I think that it's a two-edged sword. I'll tell you where I think it's a two-edged sword, because truthfully, I think that home embroiderers are incredibly inspiring because they will work on a project and they will work a piece more than a commercial person will. The difference being that on occasion, that also means they will do more as they become commercial. If they become commercial, sometimes they will do more what I call craft projects, where you really love the project. And I've done tons of these. So, by the way, I'm pointing 3 fingers at myself if I point at you. They will do projects that are artistic and creatively satisfying, but don't pay the bills because you're working a piece too long to possibly charge on a scale that's normal. I think more and more, when I first came into the business and people came from the home market into wanting to sell, they often didn't know their value. I think more and more this is finally becoming ingrained in people. They understand what things cost. They do the research. They understand what to charge for things more by far than they used to. There was the period of time where people came in and they thought of it as like, if it's just my hobby, I'm going to charge for the time that I spent, or I'm literally going to charge for materials because it's something I feel like doing. And what I would say is it's still the hours of your life. It's still a value you're providing that someone that could have done it themselves as well and didn't decide to invest in it. So that certainly is the argument. The thing is, I don't think I have to make that argument as much as I used to. There was a time when people didn't know their value from the home market coming in. And also, I'll say this. We're at a point where the prosumer level machinery is really quite good. It's decent enough to do commercial work with, sometimes a little slower, but then it also sometimes has a lot of features that commercial stuff may not have as far as automation and assistance. However, then there's a lot of people who are in that home market who say, I want to do these kinds of work that work better on commercial machines, and they buy them. There are people who even in their crafting, even in their hobby life, will buy equipment that is absolutely commensurate with what we would buy for a small commercial shop, and have that small commercial shop running in their third basement, in the basement, third bedroom, whatever. And I think that's absolutely where we're at. We're on this continuum where the lines are a lot less fine than they used to be, a lot more blurred than they used to be. Ramona says, because I do the digitizing as well as I know how something will take to stitch, I use my math to calculate my per minute cost with adjustments as needed for rush time. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that's part of it. I'm not saying don't start from the numbers. I think the problem I've always had is the thing I complained in the comments on two regular guys say I couldn't help it, even as the producer. The 99 per thousand rule. Everybody says it's 99 cents for 1,000 stitches, no matter what. It's $1 for 1,000 stitches, no matter what. And I'm going to say 1,000 stitches that I put into those patches that are in an 8-hour turnaround that I've done a bunch of creative work on, those are worth more than 1,000 stitches of the same old single color design I put on aprons for the local pizza shop that I'm going to do, once every 3 months, no matter what. The truth of the matter is there's a lot less creative work going into those 1,000 stitches. And if you're not itemizing and branching out all the different creative pieces into individual charges, then you surely need to be charging more for the embroidery itself. And if you are itemizing that, I still think it's worth more, not only from the rush free, but because you are even there to take the job on. So it's something you have to evaluate it for yourself. Of course, you can price yourself out of a market if you just go crazy with pricing. You have to know a little bit about what's going on. But I think that pricing by committee, by looking at the 3 shops closest to you and averaging their prices and going 10 cents lower, is not the way to do pricing. It doesn't really work for you, and it doesn't actually sustain you. We have to remember that there's a minimum we have to make to maintain ourselves and to stay in the business. And even if you just want to stay in the business to pay yourself a wage and keep doing what you're doing, to keep the machinery up and keep doing something you enjoy doing while keeping a roof over your head, as a solopreneur, you have to know your numbers to do that, and you're going to have to be able to kind of justify that stuff out. And what I've also told people who say, I do it mostly for fun, but also some for money, I'm like, well, wouldn't you like to have your equipment stay up? Wouldn't you like to be able to pay for the maintenance? Wouldn't you like to buy a new piece of equipment to keep doing the cool thing you want to do? Well, then profit's going to be integral to that. You're going to need profit to make that happen. Like I said, I don't think it's nearly as much. And I agree with DJ. I've seen so many inspiring works from home embroiderers. And I'll say, as I am here in the lovely and brilliant studios, watching the people who are in the Stitch Artist digitizing group, watching people become absolutely full-fledged digitizers. They are from the home market. They are doing this for fun, and they are solidly good at it. This is not plonkers. These are not people who are just trying it out and they do it once in a while. There are people who are dedicated, who are solidly good digitizers and are only craft. And I would defy people to say that they're not. That, and also, why do I know them? Because they show up to all the education that I'm doing with a commercial vein, and they're listening, and they're like sponges. So I will say I don't really love that narrative of home versus commercial. I think that this is not only a continuum, but we can cross pollinate. We can inspire each other. People in the commercial market were like, "Oh, the home designs have too many color changes, and the stitch count's bad." Talk about that stuff, educate on that stuff, and then people make more efficient designs. And then also, hey, people in the home market, commercial market, people are boring. They don't do anything cool. Keep showing all that cool work, and it will influence what customers want too, and they come to the commercial shops looking for it, and we make more of that stuff. Show the work that you think is valuable, and it helps. Plus, open up the conversation here when we're in a space like you have here at the Half, like you have on the Take Up with me, like you have in the Brilliance groups, the Stitch Artist groups, where there are these mixed groups that have that continuum represented. Have that discussion with people and bring it out, because inspiration travels all these different directions. Not to mention, I'll say that honestly, I think that there's just not as much of a mix in between that we thought, or not as much of a fine line, but that mixture has made some interesting things happen, because now there are people who really want more personalized, specialized items, and they're willing to pay someone as an artisan. They're willing to pay someone as an artisan to make a single piece because it's important to them. It is more in the culture now than it used to be. And I think that boutique embroidery, individual embroidery really leads into the home market, but there's also people who then want to take these things and become their own stores. There are so many influencers and content creators and people out there who are going to run merchandise stores, more than there have ever been. Now, they're still going to be small run, but they're probably big enough for what larger commercial shops now consider their normal minimum order. So I think that cross-pollination is happening, and also because of the difference that has happened over the market entirely, where we now favor smaller orders and quicker turnaround times, larger shops are going to do smaller orders anyway. They're going to do a little bit smaller than they used to. It's not old school. When I first came in, there were plenty of shops that were only doing, 50, 100 piece minimums. And now that's not even really considered. I mean, people are definitely down in the dozen minimums and that's larger sometimes. And I'll tell you, it's something I've always cautioned shops that are growing against is don't take out that single head machine, or you got a couple single head machines. Don't take away those 2 single head machines to replace it with a larger multi-head. You keep those now, and you run the multi-head for your volume, and you run the singles on your individual stuff and on your personalization. Or honestly, there are more and more commercial shops that want to run a fleet of singles. They would rather build up a little cluster of single head machines so that they can have the flexibility of individualized pieces in a digital production world where we have more digital printing. And that includes, in my book, I will call vinyl printing, I will call white toner transfer, sublimation, certainly are all digital. It's not just direct to garment. I mean, love direct to garment machines, love the concept, but I would go all the way back even to cut heat press vinyl. That is something that can be done digitally and can be individualized pretty simply. You can use vector text from wherever. You can have somebody enter text into an online designer and kick that out of your cutter pretty easily. We have that high personalization. I think we're at an age where we can't think of it as large scale production versus small scale production. We should just look at where we want to fit in our market. Can you be a big contract embroiderer? Absolutely. There are people who are making money as large contract embroiderers with tons of multi-head machines, football fields full of multi-head machines. But can you make money as a single head embroiderer? Absolutely, you can. It's about pricing, selling value, and finding that niche for sure. So anyway, I just like to bring that up, and I think that what was going on in the two other guys today, we were talking about that, and this idea of everybody needs to eat dinner, but there is someone who's going on date night. There is someone who's running on the way home and just wants to get something quickly and cheaply. There is someone who's looking for a new experience on their own. There is someone who wants comfort food. There is a segment for just about everybody because everyone wears clothing. Just about everybody uses some sort of promotional products or merchandise anymore. And I think that's where we are now. We're in a place where there's a diversification of ideas, and people are starting to expect that they can get what they want. I think the digital age, the internet, has made everybody have a fairly reasonable expectation that they can imagine something and get what they want. And if we're here to be the facilitators of that imagination, we're going to make money on it, especially if we do our jobs well. I think that's how it is. A couple comments. Ramona says, oh my God, I have some really cool work. It's a great spice to the general daily business left chest logo. Absolutely. I'll say one of my favorite things was to take on work like that. And I'm going to say that when we took on creative work like that, frequently would lead to other work. Take on the TV work for the costuming that's expensive and difficult, end up getting the crew garments and the work for the people in the on the lot, and it was a lot of really conventional embroidery and printing. Mike says, I have 3 12-head multis and 2 single heads. Want 2 more singles in chenille, then I think I'm good. That's a good size shop. That is a good size shop. I was at a shop that ran 60 odd heads most of the time, but we had a couple of singles. I would love to play with chenille. I haven't actually gotten to mess around with chenille machines very much, but I'd love to play with chenille more. And honestly, I would never have a shop that didn't have singles in it. Letty says, I think that what the development of Facebook, Etsy, and other areas did, that's what that did. It allowed someone who wanted to dabble to get more visibility and word of mouth to grow to a whole new community. Absolutely. And I think just like this, any one of you, any one of them can go live. We can go live. We can be online. We can talk wherever we want to. We have all of these channels. We can also find the channel that fits. If we're with a certain demographic of people, we can be on Instagram, we can be on TikTok, we can be wherever we need to be to reach these people. And we can finally target, whether with paid advertising or with our natural work, we can finally target a specific user group. It's the long tail. And I think Seth Godin, if you haven't looked it up before, I think he has a book called We Are All Weird. There's this long tail, this group of people who have very individualized kind of desires and wants. And the thing that I want to say about this is that invariably you've got people who are underserved in very specialized markets, but when they find someone serving their market, where someone is doing something for them, despite the fact that they're out on the long tail, that they're out in a smaller group, they have a tendency to buy in and support because they know that that's not always going to happen. So if you find those niches that are out on the long tail, especially if it's a niche you participate in, that you believe in, something that you're involved in, you may find that there's a large value simply in the fact that you will address a niche that's not otherwise being addressed. Podcaster merch is a cool one. Now that's become a big deal where podcaster merch is huge. Amazon's doing it, and there's people who are doing these really big stuff. But individual influencers, people like that, are doing that kind of merch. And it can be anything from a specialty design. It can be a certain type of design. Individual designers and artists have their own merch stores. It can also be a special interest. I've told you guys many times about the folk instrument stuff. And absolutely, it's not just because it's something that I played with, but I saw that people weren't being addressed. Wherever there's a desire that is not being addressed, wherever there's a group of people who is spending money on something they love and they're not being addressed, there is going to be opportunity. You know what I always say about opportunity? Hard to push the buttons by myself today, folks.